Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to talk about some upcoming releases of translated literature. We do this in connection with Invisible Cities to bring your attention to some of the upcoming releases of translated literature that don't necessarily get as much attention in all of the anticipated releases, videos and blog posts and articles and whatnot. So we eventually create a new tab to the public spreadsheet that we have for Invisible Cities resources as well, with the full list that we have collected from looking through various catalogs. But today I just wanted to bring your attention to some of the releases between October and December of books coming out in English translation that I'm really interested in. But if you want to know about more books and to sort of search through the list yourself, I will link the spreadsheet that I mentioned below so you can spend some time looking through that if you want. So first up we have Whisper by Chang Yu-ko, translated by Roddy Flagg. This is being published in October by Hunford Star, which is a small indie publisher that seems to be specializing on Korean and Japanese authors particularly. Victims all describe hearing a voice before they die gruesomely. Sometimes it's singing an old Taiwanese song, sometimes it's in Japanese, and sometimes it's in an anguished call for help from a loved one. Can Wu Shisheng, a degenerate taxi driver in Taipei, hunt down the source of the voice that killed his wife before he becomes the next victim? Whisper is a plot-driven Taiwanese horror story. As well as being a chilling read, Chang Yu-ko cleverly combines Taiwanese folklore, the Japanese occupation of Taiwan, and the long-term mistreatment of the country's Aboriginal people into a story of how the past can still kill. There are several reasons I'm interested in this one. First of all, both the Japanese and the Taiwanese folklore and history is something that I'm drawn to. I think it is just Gajili that talks specifically about the Taiwan relationship with the neighboring countries in Two Trees Make a Forest that really made me interested and feels like a part of history that I'm very unfamiliar with. So that is another reason I'm really interested in this book coming out. The next one I have is The Rooftop by Fernanda Trias, translated by Annie McDermott, and this is coming out in October by Charco Press. The world is this house's Clara while she is trying to protect her beloved ones from the world, yes, the one outside their house walls, which seems to threaten them more and more. Clara entrenches herself with her father and her daughter Flor in a dark apartment that inevitably crumbles on them. The roof becomes their last recess of freedom. A caged bird is the only witness of Clara's fear and resistance against those she thinks are trying to destroy her. The Rooftop is a claustrophobic novel about freedom and also about fear, violence, motherhood, and loss. Any books really that is going to touch on motherhood is something that I'm interested in. But I also liked the idea of it of being sort of an exploration of both threats on the outside versus the fears on the inside, and sort of how your mind plays with the reaction of things going on outside of you. The next one is a bit of a random one. It is The Notes, or Non-Premature Reconciliation by Ludwig Hohl, translated from the German by Tess Lewis. And this is published in October 19th by Yale University Press. Revered by Bertolt Brecht and Max Frisch as one of Switzerland's most commanding writers, Ludwig Hohl spent most of his waking hours with pen in hand collecting quotes from others and recording ruminations of his own. Composed between 1934 and 1936 during his residence in the Netherlands in a state of extreme spiritual desolation, The Notes is Hohl's magnum opus, an assemblage of his epiphany-like observations, disparate in subject, yet threaded together by a relentless exploration of the nature and origins of creativity. I've been really drawn to fragmentary type nonfiction, particularly in the last year maybe, and it sounds a bit like something that fits in with other authors I've been reading or other authors that I'm interested in reading. Fragmentary, explorative, reflective writing on life and art. Next one is a Korean book. This is Love in the Big City by Sang-young Park, translated by Anton Her. I mentioned another book by Anton Her in my previous anticipated releases video. He did the translation of Cursed Bunny that I have my eye on, that I will definitely be borrowing from a library in the near future. This one is coming out, let's see, on the 28th of October by Tilted Access Press. Again, a publisher that I always have my eye on. So this one is Korean queer fiction, which honestly already sold me, but it also sounded really fun and sort of very alive to me. I think particularly it strikes me as something quite different from what I usually tend to read. So it says, Love in the Big City is an energetic, joyful, and moving novel that depicts both the glittering nighttime world of Seoul and the bleary-eyed morning after. Young is a cynical yet fun-loving Korean student who pinballs from home to class to the beds of recent Tinder matches. He and Jae, his female best friend and roommate, frequent nearby bars where they suppress their anxieties about their love lives, families, and money with rounds of soju and freeze-chilled Marlboro Reds. Yet in time, even Jae settles down, leaving Young alone to care for his ailing mother and find companionship in his relationship with a series of men, including one whose handsomeness is matched by his coldness, and another who might end up being the great love of his life. I feel like also the description of this, it feels very cinematic to me. Sometimes when you read a lot of translated literature or look for translated literature, a lot of them tend to be pretty depressing, bleak, serious and heavy in subject matter, whereas this one sounded like it had more of a spark to it somehow. At least that is the impression I'm getting, so that is definitely one I'm interested in. Next one is an interesting one. I think it could be really good. It is His Name Was Death by Raphael Bernal, translated by Kit Schluter. This is coming out on the 2nd of November by New Directions. Of course, I had to have a New Directions book in this. It is described as sort of being centered around an ecological disaster. A bitter drunk forsakes civilizations and takes to the Mexican jungle, trapping animals, selling their pelts to buy liquor for colossal vendors, and slowly rotting away in his fetid hut. His neighbors, a clan of the Lacadan tribe of Chiapas, however, sees something more in him than he does himself. When he falls deathly ill, a shaman named Black Ant saves his life, and almost by chance is driving out his fever, she exorcises the demon of alcoholism as well. Slowly recovering, weak in his hammock, our anti-hero discovers a curious thing about the mosquitoes buzzing. Perhaps, in fact, it constituted a language he might learn, and with the help of a flute and a homemade dictionary even speak. So basically starts speaking with mosquitoes and takes revenge on the people who didn't believe in him or rejected him when he was a drunk. That is the impression I'm getting, and it sounds really interesting and unusual as a premise. Next, I have The Last One by Fatima Daz, translated by Laura Vergnod, and this is coming out on November 9th by Other Press. So again, we have a character study with a lesbian protagonist, much like I mentioned Permafrost in the spring anticipated releases. So that in itself made me interested, but also this book seems to tackle clashing identities or a conflict of different parts of your identity. It says, drawn from the author's experience of growing up in Paris, Banlieue, a powerful lyric debut that explores the diverse, often conflicting facets of her identity: French, Algerian, Muslim, lesbian. This extraordinary first novel, anchored and buoyed by the refrain "My name is Fatima," is a vital portrait of a young woman finding herself in a modern world full of contradictions. Daz's journey to living her sexuality in spite of expectations about who she should be offers a powerful perspective on the queer experience. Sounds fantastic, and it sounds like it's going to be a bit of an autobiographical book as well, given that it mentions Fatima, which is also the name of the author, and basing on some of the author's experiences. So yeah, it sounds good, and I'm always looking for books with lesbian characters in the forefront of the book. Then we have probably the book that I am most intrigued about, based solely on the fact that it is an Iranian novel in translation. It is called In Case of Emergency by Masha Mohebali, and this is translated by Mariam Ramani. So, as I said, it is an Iranian novel. A spoiled and foul-mouthed young woman looks to get high while her family and city falls to pieces. I mean, I don't really need to know anything more about this book, to be honest. The fact that it was a modern Iranian book in New English translation, and that it is a sort of contradiction of this woman who wants to live a life that is completely different from the society that she lives in. I was sold. But let's see. Masha Mohebali's groundbreaking novel about Iranian counterculture is a satirical portrait of the disaster that is contemporary life. Weaving together gritty vernacular and cinematic prose, In Case of Emergency takes a darkly humorous, scathing look at the authoritarian state, global capitalism, and the gender binary. I don't need anything more about this, to be honest, and this is one that I'm actually planning on buying because I need this. To close this video off, I have two books by Seagull Books, who honestly, I was looking through their catalog and all of the various releases that they are having just in the last 3 months of the year. They have so many books, and so many of them sounded fantastic, so I could have easily just made an entire video filled with their titles, but I chose two to highlight here. So we have Our Santorini Ketan by Mahawashita Devi, and this is translated by Radha Chakravarti. This is coming out in December, as I said, by Seagull Books. So this says it's a diary, I think, or a memoir / autobiography about the author growing up in the 30s. As the aging author struggles to recapture vignettes of her childhood, these reminiscences bring to the written page not only her individual sensibility, but an entire ethos. So I was already interested because of the childhood aspect and the nostalgia related to that, and it seems like it's kind of a reflective type book and a memoir. But then it's seemingly about the author's experience and connection with nature, which of course I was interested in, and something that I think I mentioned in the summer releases video as well, that I'm looking for books related to nature writing that is from other countries, from other cultures, that don't necessarily fit into the natural history term, to expand my reading on nature to other perspectives, and so that is something that I keep in the back of my mind when I'm looking for new releases, and this one was one of the ones that stood out because of that. It says, in these pages, a forgotten Santorini Ketan, seen through the innocent eyes of a young girl, comes to life. The place, its people, flora and fauna, along with its educational environment, cultural of free creative expression, vision of harmonious coexistence between the natural and human worlds, and the towering presence of Tagore itself. Sounds fantastic, and as I said, I am always now on the lookout for nature writing from other countries, other cultures, other perspectives that I haven't gotten from my mostly UK-centered nature writing reading that I've done. The last one I have is again related to nature, and again published by Seagull Books. This is Among the Almond Trees, a Palestinian memoir by Hussein Barghouti. This is translated by Ibrahim Mohavi. So, a memoir again, and this one talks about the author dealing with illness, so it also touches on the theme of death and of of mortality as well. Burgos' way of dealing with finality is to return to memories of childhood in the village of his birth in central Palestine, where the house in which he grew up is surrounded by almond and fig orchids. He takes many healing walks in the moonlit shadows of the trees, where he observes curious foxes, dancing gazelles, a badger with an unearthly cry, a weasel, and a wild boar with its young. A return not only to the house but to nature itself. The author decides to build a house where he would live with his wife and son, in whom he sees a renewal of life. The realization of his impending death also urges him to vocalize this experience, and he relates the progress of the disease at infrequent intervals, and ultimately he details the imaginative possibility of a return to life, to the earth, where he would be buried among the almond trees. I mean, that description was so beautiful already that I can just imagine this book to be fantastic. So again, a book that I am actually very likely to buy because it just sounds fantastic and very much like the kind of book that I could absolutely love. So those are all of the books that I wanted to mention in this upcoming / anticipated releases of the last 3 months of 2021 for translated books. I would love to know if any of these books sound of interest to you, if any of them are things you are going to look up, or if you have any other books that you know will be coming out in the last season of the year, if they are translated or not. I would love to chat about it in the comments below. I hope you're having a fantastic day and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.